Yeah, so this work is a joint work with Eli and Professor Eli Meirom, both from Technion. And before I discuss the work, first let me introduce the problem, although I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with that, but I've been once told to never underestimate the joy of people overhearing what they already know, so I'll take this chance. So the internet is composed of autonomous systems, and basically an autonomous system is some kind of enterprise or an economical entity, and the internet is a collection of these autonomous systems. There are about, up to date, about 40,000 to 50,000 autonomous systems, and the routing agreements they form actually dictate the allowed routing pathways in the internet. This is one of the primary examples of a large dynamical system, and it is usually it was well investigated because there is a lot of data on this system, and mainly it was investigated. The statistical properties were investigated. Mainly the node degree distribution, which is the number of links per each node, diameter, which is the maximal distance between nodes, clustering coefficient, etc. And finally, it is important to note that it is reconstructed by BGP update. It's important to know this fact here because, in fact, nobody knows the complete internet graph. It is only partially recovered and partially reconstructed by some algorithms. So this is an actually quite old image of the internet, about 10 years ago. And the question is, what kind of structures, what can game theory tells us about this graph? And just by looking at it, there are clearly visible structures. I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but at the periphery, at the outer shell, there is the structure resembles some kind of trees. And also visible are the abundance of stars. And somewhere in the center there is some kind of well-connected core. And the question is, are any of these aspects can be explained? What can game theory tell us? And in fact, are there any predictions that can be obtained using some models? So of course, we are not the first one to address this problem, but and try to model the internet topology. However, most models are stochastic in the sense that they assume that nodes are establishing in some random order or according to some probability distribution. However, autonomous systems are rational utilitarian enterprises, and therefore it is very reasonable to assume some kind of economical approach, such as a game theoretic approach. And of course, we are not the first one to address this kind of question and try to model the internet, the formation of the internet topology in terms of game theoretic models. However, previous work mostly focused on homogeneous pairs and use the common solution concept of anarchy equilibrium, which I'll explain later why it is not particularly applicable to this network formation game. And furthermore, most of them focus on the static properties. That is the price of anarchy, which is the ratio of the worst social cost in an equilibrium to the optimal social cost as in a configuration dictated by some central authority. And similarly, the price of stability is the optimal social cost in an equilibrium compared to the optimal social cost as dictated by some central authority. And finally, most of these models do not actually compare these results with the actual data. And one of the main reasons is because in most models, finding Nash equilibria is NP hard. And therefore, it is usually a difficult problem, and therefore some bounds on the price of anarchy or price of stability or other static properties are obtained, and rather than explicit topologies. So in our work, we are basically trying to form this as some kind of a network formation game. And we are focusing on the case where there are heterogeneous players. And indeed, in the internet, there are different types of players. There are major ISPs, or minor ISPs, there are content providers, there are search providers. Each one may have a different cost structure or may have different considerations. So we use a very common cost structure in the literature, which is basically derived from the works of Fabrikant and Korbs. And in this model, the cost of every autonomous system is composed of two parts. The first part is just the cost of maintaining links. So each link has some cost, which can be maintenance cost or just actually the price of establishing the actual physical link. And also, there is a cost due to distance to other nodes. This can be reasoned by, for example, delay or traffic of payment per traffic, etc.
Links are only external links?
So for each autonomous system needs to decide to which other autonomous system it has links to. Of course, from no. Okay. Okay. So of course we also address static properties such as the price of stability or price of anarchy. However, the main focus of our work is the dynamical analysis, which I'll also address in this talk, and especially we are interested in some kind of the evolution of some topological quantities, such as the mean distance between nodes or the mean distance between different types of node, the convergence rate, and finally, while we found out there is a wide range of possible equilibria, we are interested in understanding which equilibria are reasonable or likely. Reasonable in the sense that there is a large number of initial condition and dynamics that will lead to this specific equilibrium. In other words, we're interested in using terms of dynamical system, what is the Bazin of attraction for the different equilibria. And finally, we compare our result with some data analysis. So, as I said before, in our model, each autonomous system is a player. And we divide, as a simple model, we consider major players, such as the major ISP, such as an AT&T and the likes, to minor players, for example, Israeli ISPs. In other contexts, they could be a search provider in content, search engine and content provider, or any other context where there are major players and minor players. So each player, the cost structure is as follows. So each player, as we said before, has a cost that is due to the number of links. This is represented by this figure here. And of course, different types of player may have different maintenance costs. And also, and the second term, the last two terms are terms that corresponds to the cost due to the distance. It is much more important for any player to be in a close connection or in a good connection to a major player rather than a minor player. In other words, we want to weight the distance to a major player by factor A, which is greater than 1, relative to the distance to a minor player. So the distance to all the major players are the second term, this term, and the distance to all the minor players are expressed in the last term.
Is this all directed or undirected?
Directed.
Directed.
Sorry, undirected. Undirected, yes. So, and we use the solution concept of a pairwise equilibrium, which is basically a generalization of the Nash equilibrium that takes into account that agreements are actually bilateral contracts. So in order to establish a link, both parties have to agree. So it means that, however, destroying a link or removing a link requires only the agreement of one party. This can be done unilaterally. So a pairwise equilibrium is a condition where no players would like to remove links. That is, there is no single player deviation, similarly to Nash equilibrium. However, there are no two players that would like to establish a link as well. So no additional links and no addition of links and no removal of links. And we allow monetary transfer by simply adding a term that amounts to the expenses minus the revenues for each player. And each player may pay for some other player to establish a link. And as we said before, we focus on dynamics, the generated topology, and we would like to compare our prediction with the data. So I'll run briefly over the subject because we all want to eat lunch. So one of the first predictions that we found that under reasonable condition, which I'm not going to elaborate on now, the major players for a click. I'll denote major players by squares and minor players by circles. So the major player will form some kind of click. This is indeed reasonable because we know that in the internet, the tier 1 are almost the tier 1 autonomous system form a clique or almost a complete, or almost actually a clique. And however, the minor players may come in a wide variety of structure. Each structure will be connected to the clique. So there could be some trees, there could be not necessarily trees, there could be even loops or long line or some links between these trees or any, or not any, but there is a wide range of possible structures that the minor players can be in. I'll skip this. And yeah.
So how many major players do you have relative to the number of minor players?
So it's a parameter of our model. But basically we are interested in the case where the reasonable case there are much more minor players than major players. But this is a parameter of the model. Okay, so before I get to some results, if we allow monetary transfer, then the condition for the establishment of an edge is the following, which basically means it is equivalent to saying that there is some kind of price that, for example, that either player I pays player J or vice versa, such that both players, it is beneficial for both players to establish these links. Note that if there is no such, if monetary transfer are not allowed, then the condition for the establishment of a link is that each term individually has to be negative. So in a game theoretic sense, this means that the two players game have an unempty core. And why is that important? Because for without monetary transfer, we can derive some kind of bound between the maximal distance of a player to the major player core. That is to the set of Cyan squares here. However, without monetary transfer, this depends on the number of some of the parameters of the models, basically A, C, etc., but not on the number of players in the network. However, with monetary transfer, this bound actually depends on the number of players, and the maximal distance is reduced with the number of players. And the main reason is, it can be reasoned as follows. So, as the number of players increase, any player has a greater incentive to be closer to the center, because by that it reduces its distance to a larger set of nodes. As its incentive to be close to the center is greater, it will be willing to pay more. As it will be willing to pay more, the other players may be willing to agree, will be more likely to agree to this link formation. Now, this may sound trivial, but it is important to note that this is actually in contradiction with many other models. For example, in most random network models, the mean distance or the mean distance between nodes grows with the size of network. And in fact, this will be, as we'll go to the data analysis section, will show that indeed it is actually not only by this paper, it is well known that the network, that if we consider, for example, the common belief that the internet is the degree distribution of the internet is a parallel network, then it is well known that the network is with time does not go fast enough. And the question is, and in fact, along some period, the mean distance between nodes is actually decreasing. So our model, in some sense, gives some explanation to this effect. So this was one. This, for example, a sample of our prediction in the static case, and in the dynamic case, we extend our discussion of pairwise equilibrium to a pairwise interaction, and we do that by considering the following. So each player, each agent has act in its own turn, and in its turn, it may perform multiple actions. An action can be, for example, the establishment of an edge or the removal of an edge. And of course, the establishment of an edge will require the agreement of the other party involved. So we consider multiple order types, whereas agents act randomly or in some fixed order. However, this does not matter different. And we also consider the case where there are different time scales between cost evaluation and dynamics. And in particular, that means that, for example, whether players may, in its turn, may, for example, remove some links, and by that temporarily increasing its cost, only to pose a reliable threat and get and perform some kind of strategic plan in order to obtain to be in a better position at the end of the turn, and I'll also discuss preference different pricing order for the edges. So I'll just skip to the result. First of all, while there is a wide range of equilibria, in fact, convergence is limited only to is restricted to a limited subset of equilibria, and it happens quite fast, linear in the number of players. And we know there is an emergence of a new type of player, and it's a major player not by its by the content that it holds. For example, it is not one of the original major players, but it rather a major player by topological centrality. Consider, for example, this case where there is some kind of star center of minor players. If there are enough players at the star, then it is beneficial for major players to establish a link with it, because by the price of only a single link, it reduces a distance to all the set of the nodes in the stars. So if there is some kind there is some kind of threshold that if there are enough members in the stars, then it is beneficial for nodes to establish link directly with it. In other words, if this player will become a member of the clique, because all the other players in the clique will establish link with it, and therefore, if we now remove the labels, we'll consider this one. That is, we'll remove the labels. We will become ignorant to the fact to the titling of players according to major players and minor players. This player will be identified as a major player. And also, we noted that convergence is often to the optimal state or the asymptotic optimal state. And by optimal state, I mean that the social cost is asymptotically converges to the optimal social cost. And finally, I would like to note that monetary transfer does not always improve the social cost. And this can be reasoned by, again, the previous example. So we said that there is some kind of threshold according to which major players will establish link with it. And now we consider this star's importance in general, and we know that in fact there are two parameters that control its role. First of all, as we said before, it's the number of links. In addition, there is the other parameters is the number of major players that establish link with it. Because, for example, if all the major players establish link with will establish link with the star center, then it is beneficial for other minor players to establish a link with it, rather than, for example, this major player. So we can map this to a two-dynamical system where the parameters are basically the number of nodes that are directly connected to the stars and the number of links that exist between the star center and any one of the major players. And and this is basically a 2D dynamical system, and it's a linear, and therefore we can analyze the nullline and the different basin of attraction. And we note, for example, consider, for example, the case that we are close to the threshold of a positive feedback loop that happens if there are enough players that are attached to the star center, then the minor players will establish additional links. Then any one of the major players will establish additional links with the star center, and by that increasing its attractivity to other minor players, and therefore there will be some kind of positive feedback loop. And if we are considering the case where the number, for example, of players that are attached to the star are close to the threshold but not close enough, and we consider the case where now the star center may act, may pay some fee to one of the major players, such that it will agree to establish a link with it. By that, it will increase its attractivity to any one of any new coming minor player, which will indeed increase its attractivity to additional major players in terms of, in the sense that now perhaps some other major player will establish a link with it for free. So analyzing the different scenario is that between the configuration where the nodes are centered around the star center, or where the nodes are centered, for example, on one of the major players, we can see that monetary transfer does not always improve the cost. So I'll just run very quickly to the data analysis. So one of our predictions was that the major players form some kind of a clique. So we defined so the major players according to some external criteria. Specifically, there is some kind of autonomous system ranking by Qaeda, not Al-Qaeda, just a website called Qaeda. Maybe that would be related to the previous talk. So we consider this 100th autonomous system as the core of the internet. And now this map shows the network map when the first 100, when the first top 100 nodes, autonomous systems are removed. And basically the network is then fragmented into multiple small subgraphs. And in this image, the outer shell corresponds to a very simple subgraph, and the more complex structures are in the center. So for example, in the outer shell, there are just single nodes. That is, there were nodes that were directly connected to one of the 100 top autonomous systems. And in the center, we can see the abundance of stars, lines, and mainly simple trees as predicted in our model. So our model showed that there will be mainly stars, trees, and lines, and these can be seen in this graph. And there are two more predictions to our model. Oh, before that, this is an image of actually the first 40 autonomous systems, or the graph between the subgraph of the first 40 autonomous systems. And while it is not, by the way, this is just 40, not 100, because 100, it would not be possible to see anything in 100 node graph. So while it is not a complete clique, it is well connected. And our prediction is that in time, this graph should turn to a complete graph. And this can be seen. The x-axis is actually the date. And in the green, we show the mean distance between the top 100 autonomous systems. And we see that the mean distance actually declines in time. And this is according to our prediction that the major player should form a clique in time. And also, we showed that as the number of players increases in the network, the mean distance between a minor player and one of the major players' clique should decrease. And in practice, the number of autonomous systems always increase in time. And therefore, we see, and our model therefore predicts that the mean distance should decrease in time as well. And therefore, this is displayed in the blue line, where the mean distance between any one of the 2,000 secondary nodes to the top 100 nodes is plotted. And as we can see, there is some kind of a decrease in the mean distance. So just to conclude, so we established some kind of a network formation game, and we included multi-money transfer, and we mainly focused on the on the dynamics, including different dynamical setting. In our models, there is a natural partition to a core shell, and we showed that the core should be roughly a clique, and the mean distance between a node in the shell to the core should decrease with the number of nodes, or in general with the number of time in time. And we evaluated our prediction according to the data analysis. So, any questions, or better yet, lunch? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear.
The links.
Yeah.
Are the IPv4 links?
Oh, so are you asking about the data set?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some collaboration from a university in Pisa, but basically they have a long history of the graph of the internet from, I think, 2002.
That's
No, that's a different data set. Okay, and there are also many data sets available or for free on the. Yeah, so our data set is from our collaborator in Italy, in Pisa, but there is you can get it from different multiple sources on the internet.
I know. I'm asking whether you applied to the IPv4
So we have the graph, and then we have the ranking of the top 100 the autonomous system, and we remove these specific nodes, these specific autonomous systems. Okay, never mind.
How do you surface events?
To autonomous. Okay, so in our model, if they are same, they will be basically have the same connection. So in other words, we do not reduce, we do not do any operation on the map as given. We just consider the network map as is. We don't, for example, mesh two siblings to one node.
Especially if you look on the top 100 and on the platform which is presented, there are bottles of measuring, a lot of accusations with major ISPs, which explains why you saw a decrease in the degree, because they protest each other and then they form the range because they are the same company now.
But usually they keep the same autonomous number. So if one company.
Autonomous number, but since it's the same ISPs, automatically becomes.
But she means multiple numbers account for the same business unit.
Yeah, that may happen, but it's not that frequent, first of all. And usually in beforehand, it usually means that say, let's put it this way, even beforehand, they're usually at the one node distance. Right? They should be at the two node distance in order to see any change. Because beforehand, they would now we would consider them at a one node distance after the acquisition. Yeah.
And last, you spoke specifically about the top 2000 AES.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's very interesting to look actually on the nodes closer to the 10,000, 20,000 AES, where you are not only looking on the main ISPs, but all the new AESs that are joining. Did you try to look at that and see if the model applies?
So in our model, our model only predicted that there will come kind of a core and the shell partition. So it doesn't really address specifically what happens to new coming nodes.
I'm not talking about it.
I suggest we take more questions offline, and let's thank the speaker again.
Okay.